Today, we're going to be talking about Jeju Air Flight 2216 that tragically killed 179 people so far. Today is December 31st, 2024, and this is the most current information we have as of now. My name is Gary Baumgartner. If you're new to the channel, I appreciate you watching. I've been an airline pilot for 17 years. I hold 4 different type ratings, including the 737. And I'm going to share the new info that we have as of now, and then I'm going to kind of dive in and talk about what my thoughts are and kind of possibly formulate some theories on what went wrong. Now, when I say theories, remember that is it. It's just theories. It's not actually, we're going to wait for the full investigation before we pass any blame or before we jump to any conclusions. So let's jump into it and let's present what we have so far. So let me come over here. Sorry, bear with me. I'm in my new studio here and I'm still learning all this. So appreciate the patience. This is my new studio. This is my first actually full length YouTube video I'm shooting in the new studio. So still got a lot of equipment to set up, but I appreciate you watching. All right, so let's talk about this. So this was Jeju Air Flight. It was, I don't know why they do the 7C, honestly. It must be some weird thing, but it was 2216. Here's what we know so far. So it was Jeju Air. It was 2216. It was coming in from Bangkok to Muon International Airport, South Korea. Okay, it was a 737-800, and it is approximately 15 years old. And as far as we've seen, there's been no accidents, no reports, or any other problems with that plane. So December 29th, shortly after 9 a.m. local, the crash occurred and it overran the runway and collided with the concrete barrier. I'm going to show you that video footage here in a little bit. Um, that's tragic because out of 181 people on board, 179 passed away. And apparently, it was only 2 flight attendants that survived that were in the very back, which goes to show that most times the back of the plane apparently is the most safe. But we're going to get into this a little bit more here in a second. Okay, so here's what they're saying in the potential causes. And this is, again, this is just initial info. We need the voice, we need the cockpit voice recorder, we need the flight data recorder, and we need a lot of other things going on to before we can go. But this is just what we've heard so far. So the potential causes we are talking about, there's been reports of a bird strike. Now, I've seen a video myself that apparently showed the plane going over the top. And I don't know if this, maybe this was on a missed approach because I'm going to get into this in a second. Apparently, the plane had came in, tried to land, and then went missed approached and turned around and landed on the opposite runway. And we'll talk about that. But apparently, there was a bird strike. Um, in my opinion, I am yet to understand why that a bird strike would cause a landing gear failure, as well as many other pilots out there. Like there's either a catastrophic failure with this plane, or it's very something serious. Like the pilots were so stressed that they forgot the gear. I I don't know, but it's very hard. I did a YouTube short on this briefly, but the 737 has two main hydraulic systems: System A, System B, and then there's a standby system, and then as well as a manual gear extension. And the manual gear extension, I've never seen a time where all of these fail and then all of the landing gear wouldn't come down. I've seen instances like, I believe it was about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, Delta had to land at Charlotte Airport and their nose gear didn't come down, but the main still came down. So I've never seen it where all the landing gear would not come down. Again, I'm just speculating here, but I have a hard time thinking that it's just the gear that like all the gear failed at the same time, which would lead me to possibly think that maybe the pilots just forgot the gear. But then again, I don't know how you forget that when you have gear horns and other warnings when you're coming into land. But then again, if they knew they weren't landing with flaps, which we'll get to in a second, maybe that overread that and they weren't thinking about it. But typically, most planes will have a too low gear, too low terrain, and they'll have some type of warning system in that so that you never land um, with the gear up. Um, the weather conditions, according to the video, it looked good, so it didn't seem to be like weather was a factor. The key concerns here are the absence of the landing gear deployment, as I was just saying. I do not understand how this plane landed. And again, we're going to have to wait for more data to figure out why this actually landed with the gear up. What else is interesting too is, as we'll take a look here in a second in the video, is the lack of flaps or slats deployed. Okay, so there was, as far as I can tell in the video, there were no flaps. The flaps are what come down in the trailing edge of your wing, and that allows you to increase your rate of descent without increasing your airspeed, and essentially allows you, the more flaps and slats you have, the slower you can touch down, the slower your stall speed becomes. Reports I've seen show that this airplane was landing almost at 200 miles an hour, which is insanely fast. Um, and we'll get to more about that in a second. But the flaps and slats coming out, at the very least, let's say systems A and system B had failed. The standby system should have allowed the standby system should have allowed it, at the very least, the slats to come out. That's the leading edge of the wings, and that increases your surface area, which will help with your, being able to slow down and to, to help yourself get the plane slower. Um, Apparently, so this is another thing. And we'll look at this in a second on Google Maps, but the collision, that everybody said it was a concrete barrier, and apparently there's reports that it was not compliant with international safety standards. Well, the more I've looked into this, it appeared to be a type of like berm, or like a dirt mound. I don't even know what the word I'm looking for here is. I'm blanking on it, but it was like a berm or some type of raised uh, level of dirt that was really thick. And if you watch the video, it actually hits that and explodes when it hits that. Now there was some metal on top of that, but I don't know what that huge mound of dirt was doing there. It was almost like, I don't know what, I don't know. This is something we're gonna have to figure out. I guess as of now, what I saw is only one of the black box was recovered, but they're looking for the second one. Hopefully, I mean, I don't see how they wouldn't find it. It was a more of a slow moving crash, so I would hope that they would find the other one. And then, right now they're going to be focusing on the mechanical failures, the pilot actions, and apparently, somebody high up in North Korea said they're doing a complete overhaul of safety because, rightly so, people are kind of freaking out. All right, so this is some things that stand out to me. The crew information, right? I hate this. I think this is one of the worst things for a pilot to do. Apparently, the report time was 2 a.m. So what I'm guessing is they probably took off around 3 a.m. And that is so listen, I will do red eyes, right? I would do, when I was LAX based, I would do red eyes all the time, because typically at night you'd leave, you leave 10:30 at night and you'd leave LAX and you'd fly to the East Coast. But you leave at 10:30, it's, you have a tailwind typically, going east, and you have the jet stream, and you only fly for, maybe sometimes I would do flights, let's just say LAX to North Carolina, and I could do it in 4 hours and 15 minutes. So 10:30, 4 hours, you're basically only awake till 2, 3 a.m. your local time. And it's different working the red eye because you're just staying awake versus, you can take a nap in this. But 2 a.m. to me right here is so insane, because I've had shows where I'd had to wake up at, I've had to set my alarm at times for 3:50, 4:15 a.m. It's insane. I don't care who you are. Maybe some people can do it, not me. I cannot go to bed at 7 p.m. and get the full amount of sleep. It just doesn't work. Like, my mind doesn't work that way. And, I'll still fall asleep at 10 p.m. and then you have 4 hours of sleep and then you just feel terrible. Right now, this is where it falls on us pilots to come into, to be professionals. And if you're fatigued, you're fatigued. But who knows? Maybe you show up at 2 a.m. and at the time you feel good. And then you're in flight and you're like, whoa, whoa, I'm really fatigued. And this is the exact reason why, I'm on the 777 now. When we fly to Europe, we have 3 pilots going over there because you have to take breaks. We have crew rest bunks and we get a nap in and sleep to ensure that we're all properly rested. So, not to go off on a tangent here, but I absolutely hate this 2 a.m. show. Like, it either needs to be a red eye at night or enough time, a 6 a.m., maybe even a 5 a.m. is okay. But a 2 a.m. report, what time are you waking up? I mean, how close is your hotel? Is that where you know what I mean? Like, if you, best case scenario, you may be waking up at 1 a.m. How do you do that? So I don't know. I don't like it. As I mentioned, the landing attempt, the first landing attempt was tempted on run not 19 and was aborted, but we don't know why. We don't know. Now, going around is fairly normal. That's not uncommon. I don't want to say it's uncommon, but it's not like out of the ordinary. It can happen, and it's not a big deal for us. So I don't understand. We need to understand why they went around. But what is odd is typically if you're going to land on the runway 19, you would circle a full 360 degrees and come back and land on that same runway. What is odd is that they circled 180 and came back and landed the opposite way. Ah, this is another odd thing. Typically, unless the winds were calm, typically you land into the wind, right? You can sometimes get away with a tailwind, but once it gets above typically about 10 knots, you're not landing with a tailwind because it's like you're moving with the wind and you need you want to be landing in the wind. So the fact that they turned around may indicate that there was something happened in between that go around that they thought they had to put this plane down, and that's what I'm going to get into when I'm looking at this, because my hope is, well, let's start with this. When if you have a bird strike, and let's just say you had a bird strike and you lost an engine, that now don't get me wrong, that's not anything pilots want to deal with, but we are trained for it. Every 6 months to a year, every airline is different for how often you go to the sim and you practice, but every airline is different, but you're practicing for this stuff. So this isn't like anything that pilots aren't unprepared to handle. So what's not matching up is one engine going out and then suddenly the quick running in as to why the the gear was left up. Was it a malfunction? Did they get, my theory, and I've talked to a couple other pilots already so far, is maybe they had, um, smoke in the cockpit or something and they couldn't see. And then this was like they thought, okay, I have to put this plane down. Maybe the gear failed too. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but what I'm saying is it's extremely unlikely. And this whole thing is highly unusual. So again, we'd have to correct this. It wasn't actually the concrete wall. It was the raised mound of dirt that it hit. The wall was kind of almost cinder block, and basically, baby, I think there was only like the size of a car that was actually knocked out. So the concrete wall wasn't as much as a factor as was that entire mound of dirt that stopped the plane. And you can see, we'll look at it in a second. You can see the explosion. Looking at this, there's a couple options I think of what happened. The bird strike could have taken out an engine. They may have panicked. It also there could have been, maybe it was a 1 in a billion chance that the bird strike happened and then all of a sudden the other hydraulic went out and then the manual landing gear extension failed. I don't know. But what is odd to me is how fast they tried to put it on the ground, because if you were to do a go around and lose an engine, okay, we practice this too. It's basically called a V2 cut. So you go around and you lose an engine. The plane can fly just fine with one engine. So here's the deal though. If you do lose an engine, or let's say your gear isn't coming down, I would be taking my time to plan out, make sure everything's good. When we watch this video in a second, you're going to see that I don't see any fire trucks waiting at the end of the runway. I mean, that whole place should have been filled with fire trucks waiting and ready. So it appears to me that it was either this is what it's coming down to me. There was either two options. One, they had no time, something catastrophic happened, and they thought we have to put this plane down or else we're all going to die real quick. Because there is another shot of the plane diving. So again, there could have been a flight control malfunction. I don't know. It's that, or they rushed it and they really didn't do a good job at preparing for this. Because if what we're taught in emergencies is to not panic. You take your time. When we lose an engine, we actually just fly the plane. When you're taking off, we will practice to fly the plane, take off, and you lose the engine right as you're lifting off the runway. And we don't panic right away. We land and we acknowledge engine failure and we start different procedures, but we actually get the plane off the ground. There's the old saying in aviation: aviate, navigate, communicate. Those are the three terms that they tell you to do. And so the first thing you do is fly the plane. So again, if I'm losing an engine, we're gonna fly the plane. We're gonna secure the engine. If there's a fire, we'll fight the fire. If not, we try and restart. If there's no significant damage, we can even restart the engine and get it back down. If not, just shut it down. And there's some people that say, "Hey, the engine's already down. Let's not even relight it. We're right here. The airport's right there. Let's just land a single engine." That's how prepared we are for it. That it's not a big deal. So I think that that's what I would have done if I had the time. The second thing, so let's say you get up there and let's say, and again, we don't even know if they had an engine failure, but let's say you get up there and your gear is not retracting. Okay. Unless I have to put that airplane on the ground, I'm going to give myself significant amount of time and preparation to get this plane landed. I'm going to have the fire trucks ready. Also, what we're going to look in a second is the plane appeared to land almost halfway down the runway. Okay. Even when you have gear with brakes, we are taught that if you do not land on the first third, which is known as the touchdown zone, you do not land. You go around and you try it again because the odds of running off the end of the runway are pretty serious. Something's odd here because if you had the time, you would burn your fuel, you'd make sure the trucks are prepared, you would come in and land very first part of the runway as close as you could. But what you can watch in the video is that, as I mentioned before, if you don't have slats and flaps, you will float for a long time. There is so much energy that when you're normally compared to how you would normally land, this thing would float for a long time. So what it looks like to me is they floated, they didn't have the power out. And I would, as I said, I would have tried to put that thing on the front part and, let it slide and have time and formulate a plan. And watching this, I think that either the gear failed or they simply were overwhelmed and they forgot. So let's go here and take a look at some other things. So let's look at the Google Earth here real quick. So if you look here, this is the plane was coming towards us right here. So if we come over here on Google Earth, this right here, the plane collided just on the other side of this, apparently about 200 meters. And the only thing that was this concrete wall that everybody's talking about, I think there was only like one tiny section right here that was actually taken out. But, going back to the map, this is where they came in. They came in this way on runway 1 and tried to land and went around. And so if we zoom back out up here, they came back around and then came this way. It didn't look like they, I've seen reports that they touched down about a third down on the runway. With no gear, that's not a good option as we can see, but especially not at 200 miles an hour. I don't know why the plane couldn't have got slowed, and I don't know why you wouldn't have gone around unless you thought that you had to put this plane on the ground. But what I was talking about before is the touchdown zone. So even when you have gear, the right here, this last marking, that's the last place you can legally touch down before you have to go around. Because at that point, you are outside the touchdown zone and they don't deem it safe to land. The video that we're going to watch here in a second was apparently shot right from about here, from as best I could tell, was here. Now, this looks like a really old map because I did find um, this building over here, but I could not find the control tower. And it looks like there's still all this construction. So I don't know how old this overview is, but it apparently looks like this video is kind of shot at an angle. And from the video I've seen, it looks like it's touching down maybe a third, but it's about halfway down the runway and it skids off right here. And this is where it hit this, whatever, I don't know why I can't think of the name of this, but it's just a berm of dirt where here. And it looks like this is part of the ALS or the ILS. I think this might be part of the ILS. I think this is the ALS here. And this is the ILS, which basically sends a signal off directly centered off this. And that allows the plane to track straight into the runway. So if we go over to the video now, see, this is what I'm talking about. The shot is here. And we start here. Um, we start here and it looks like the plane's touching down. Maybe it already touched down, but it's not slowing down. So I'm going to mute that. And so as it shows down like this, again, here we're looking closely right here. There's no slats out, and there's also no flaps. And this thing is moving. And so as it comes is it keeps rolling down the runway. There's really nothing to stop it on the concrete for how fast it's going. Now, here's a really sad part right here. Most airports, if I go back here, I don't say most, but a lot of airports have a thing called EMAS. And I can't even tell you what that acronym stands for, but basically what it is, it's a huge chunk of concrete that's collapsible that if a plane ever goes into it, it basically prevents, it just slows all the energy down and the concrete breaks down and it sinks in. So it sinks in to the concrete, but it will stop it. And there was actually an incident, years ago, maybe I want to say 2009, 2010, in Charleston, West Virginia, where the plane would have gone off. The Charleston, West Virginia airport is on the top of a mountain, and this plane would have went right off the side and killed everybody. But thankfully, it had an EMAS on this side here and right here, and it saved everybody because the plane stopped. Had this had an EMAS right here, this most likely everybody would have survived this. Additionally, as we're watching here, so we'll go back to the video, as it comes up here and slams into that, that's what I'm talking about right there. It's a huge, this dirt mound. Hold on, I'm gonna look right now. You have to bear with me. I took a, yeah, it's an embankment. I don't know what's wrong with me. Why I can't think of an embankment, but that's what it's in as embankment. And it looks, I don't know why they had an embankment there because right there, it's again, I'm speculating here, but it's my personal belief that had that embankment not been there, they A would have had more time to slow down. The plane would have slowed down more and been a slower speed. But B, I don't think that this concrete wall that looks to be just cinder blocks is actually going to be that much of a problem. And I think that honestly, again, speculating, right? The engines may have ripped back at that wall and ripped it into the plane and it could have blown up. But I think especially without that wall and without that embankment, I think that the plane would have just continued on and skidded down as we talked about. Let's go back and look at that road. It would have just skidded along. And yeah, there would have been some damage, maybe some injuries, but your hope is it wouldn't have exploded. It could have though, right? Again, we don't know. We're speculating, but we do know for sure is that embankment didn't help. And so that's what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to wait for all the details to come out. We're gonna have to see we're gonna have to see what happened, that why all the pilots I've talked to so far have said this felt very rushed. And as it feels rushed, it does make sense because why in this video there should have been fire trucks all up and down this airport waiting. There should have been time to burn the fuel. So for the pilot's sake, I'm kind of hoping that something happened that they had no other option. A couple of additions, I see there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and don't get me wrong, I love a good conspiracy theory, but okay, one, people are like, oh, I wonder who was on this plane that had to go. No, okay, this is not planned. A bird strike there. The other main thing that I've seen that I think is absolutely ridiculous is that it was a pilot suicide, which is this is the worst pilot suicide ever. I mean, as I just mentioned, had it not been for that embankment and that wall, I think probably everybody on that plane would have survived. Maybe not. Again, it could have exploded and, the wall or something else could have set it off. So, it's not for sure. But why would the pilots go in and attempt to land and put the plane right on the runway? Now granted, they landed a little long, but without flaps and slats, like that's a possibility. Why didn't you go around? We don't know yet. But if you're trying to if you're a pilot, if you want to do a pilot suicide, no, that just doesn't add up to me in any way. And again, never say never. There's always that 0.0001% chance that it could have happened or there, but I don't understand that. I mean, absent that embankment, they probably would have survived. So it doesn't make sense. I'm not even going to give people ideas, but there's plenty of ways. You're in control of that plane. If you actually wanted to do a pilot suicide, it's not. There's other ways to do it. We'll just leave it at that. Guys, this was my first video in the studio. I really appreciate you watching. If you made it this far, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like, and I would hope that you consider subscribing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you think of anything interesting. Again, this is just the information we have at the time. Some of this may turn out that it's not actually true or that's changed. As information comes out, it's evolving. So we're going to kind of see, what we know. But I really appreciate, um, you guys tuning in to watch, and let me know what topic you'd like me to cover next. Until next time, see ya.